Part 42. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 411. The thief said it casually, but Gu Mingde was moved. He still remembered the rumors he heard when he stayed at Mr. Li's house on the road. Even though he was confused, he never showed it on his face. Instead, he scolded the thief on trial. Ridiculous, this person was obviously deceived by you and sold by you, and he dared to talk nonsense about supernatural things. The thief was aggrieved at this time and said, "Sir, if these children were really sold by us, why did you hide it from us so hard? There is no need to transfer them away at night. They will definitely let us send them out of the city directly. Could it be that so many people are still sold in the capital?" Gu Mingde actually considered what the thief said. After all, if the children were really abducted in the capital and sent to other places to sell, it would not be cost-effective no matter how you look at it. First, the prices in the capital are high, so most of the people from other places come to the capital to sell, because they can sell them at a higher price in the capital than in other places. Secondly, this is the foot of the emperor, with strict security, so it is not convenient to kidnap or sell people. According to another piece of information revealed by the thief, they also went to other places to kidnap and buy people, but they kidnapped the surrounding areas of the capital, and all places were alert, so it was not easy to kidnap people. Unfortunately, the noblemen behind the scenes wanted people more urgently, so they had to take risky measures. If they had not kidnapped too many people and the frequency of kidnapping was too high, they would have directly turned a small case into a big case, and it would not have attracted the attention of the higher authorities like it is now. After a whole day of interrogation, Gu Mingde probably had a clue in his mind. The children in front should not have been sent out of the capital, but should be in a corner of the capital, but he still couldn't figure out what the person behind the scenes was going to do and why he needed so many children. These children were relatively young, and there was no restriction on gender. It seemed that both boys and girls were liked, but there was no news after they were kidnapped. When Gu Mingde returned home and the whole family sat at the dining table, he was still uneasy. "Waiter, eat the food," Grandma Gu suddenly said in a hoarse voice. Since Niu came home, Grandma Gu has been like a god. Her health has improved rapidly. She can now get out of bed and walk around. She doesn't want to eat alone in the house. She still prefers the feeling of the whole family sitting together to eat. She urged Gu Mingde at this time. The reason is very simple. After Gu Mingde sat at the table, he kept eating white rice with his eyes blank and didn't eat a single bite of food. Gu Mingde lowered his head and took a look at the food his mother urged him to eat. It happened to be his favorite dish, and his heart was warmed. Niu said beside him, "Dad is thinking about the case. He wants to take those children home." The whole family became interested when they heard this and asked, "Where is the case now?" This case is different from Zhang Yuniang's previous case, but there is nothing that cannot be said. After hearing what Gu Mingde said, Old Lady Gu nodded and said, "Maybe someone is secretly offering sacrifices behind the scenes." Gu Mingde actually had no idea at this time. After all, so many people in the capital had no news at all, and they could only point to the same result. When he thought that there might be no survivors, he was so upset that he almost couldn't eat. Zhang Yuniang immediately noticed that something was wrong with her husband and comforted him, "My husband, maybe it's not what you think. If you can catch the murderer and bring him to justice, you will be worthy of them." Gu Mingde saw his daughter's worried eyes again. He took a deep breath, nodded, and asked his mother, "Mom, have you seen anything similar?" Old Lady Gu showed a look of reminiscence on her face and said, "I have seen such things twice. The most recent one was about 10 years ago. There was a big case in Guang'an County. In an abandoned and dilapidated temple, the house collapsed because of thunder, and a child's body was turned out on the ground. After being discovered by passers-by, the government came and turned over the ground of the temple, and then found that there were 7 or 8 children's bodies buried inside. Such a horrifying case, Gu Mingda had never heard of it because he was devoted to studying in those years. Has the government found out anything? Gu Mingda asked. Old Lady Gu shook her head, sneered, and said, those good-for-nothings have been investigating for a long time without any clues, so we can only close the case as an unsolved case. Gu Mingda asked, Mom, do you have any other opinions? Old Lady Gu lowered her voice and said, the first time I saw this kind of thing, I was not married at that time. There was a Taoist priest who used the purest boys and girls in the world as a trigger to practice evil methods and seek the way to immortality. However, he did not get immortality, but was wiped out by the government. So I say that the government in our Guang'an County is really worse than the previous one. When Gu Mingda heard the word evil methods, he suddenly thought of the last words Wu Wulang said before he died. He was immediately frightened. Could it be that Wu Wulang was hinting that someone was really practicing evil magic in the case of the missing child? These people who practice evil magic are really abominable. Every child is a treasure in the family, but they have become a shortcut for them to seek power, Zhang Yuniang said viciously. She couldn't help but worry about her second son at this time. If there really was someone who had been practicing evil magic, and this person was in the capital, was it possible that her son didn't enter the palace? When Zhang Yuniang thought of this possibility, her heart was in a knot. She wished her husband could catch the real culprit immediately. Mrs. Gu suddenly said, speaking of which, I saw a very strange child when I was watching the excitement outside every day. The whole family immediately looked at the old lady. The child was crazy and kept chanting spells, saying things like I don't want to die, let him go, don't use him to practice martial arts, Mrs. Gu said. Although Gu Mingda felt that this matter was a bit coincidental, now all the clues were broken, he felt that he had to try any clues. Mom, where is the child? Do you remember? Gu Mingda asked. Mrs. Gu shook her head and said, I saw him on Liaolang Street. The child was about 8 or 9 years old, with unkempt hair and a fierce face. I'm afraid it's hard to recognize him. He may not be related to this matter. Otherwise, let's forget it. No, we must find him, Gu Mingda said. Gu Mingda had a hunch that this child might really contain clues to the real culprit behind the scenes, or even that this child might have escaped from that place, so he must know something. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shenshen. Chapter 412. Perhaps because of the direction, Gu Mingda gained a rare appetite. After finishing his dinner in a hurry, he helped Mrs. Gu back to the house and asked her mother many details about practicing evil practices and the child. Niu Niu told Zhang Yuniang and was about to pull the person behind her. Sister Shuiying told me to go find her at night and said she had something delicious to give me, Niu Niu said happily. It was now the time for Niu Niu to change her teeth. Zhang Yuniang also knew that Niu Niu was a good child, so she did not stop her. She only warned, if you take something delicious, you have to eat it tomorrow. Eating before going to bed can easily damage your teeth. Niu Niu nodded and said, don't worry, Mom, I can bear it tonight. But when the little girl entered the backyard and smelled the tangy fragrance, she couldn't help but salivate. Because the crazy girl likes cooking so much, the Gu family built a small kitchen for her in the backyard, and the ingredients she needs will be supplied on time. Sister Shuiying. I'm coming. Niu ran into the house happily, and Shuiying was also very happy to see the little girl. Miss Third, I haven't seen you all day today. What are you busy with outside? Shuiying asked casually. Niu Niu said, I am accompanying my father on the case. It's a pity that I didn't get many clues in the yamen today, but after returning home, Grandma provided us with important clues. Shuiying didn't care about the outside world at all. She just hoped that Niu Niu would talk to her more. Whatever she said was fine. As long as she could be with Niu Niu, she would be happier than anything else. What clues do you need? Maybe I can help too, Xiuying asked with a smile. Zhang Yuniang wanted to say that the crazy girl had been in the inner house all the time. How could she know what was going on outside? But then she thought about it. The crazy girl seemed to have told a lot about things in the palace before, and the origin of this person was a mystery. Maybe she really knew something strange. Niu Niu said, some people practice evil methods, which seems to be related to the disappearance of many children in the capital. When the crazy girl heard this, she immediately said, then we have to ask Wu Lang to handle this matter. Wu Lang has been fighting on the battlefield all year round. He can't stand these things the most. There were people who did such things secretly before, but he led a group of scolds. Ho Bing immediately caught the Taoist who was practicing evil behind the scenes. Niu tilted her head and asked, which Wu Lang is it? Where should I find him? Niu wanted to help her father, and she also wanted to rescue the abducted children as soon as possible. The crazy girl said, Wu Lang is Wu Lang. He is a very strange person. He doesn't like to live in the house where Yusai is left. He likes to live in Kinko Lane. He says that the place is remote and hidden and difficult to be found by outsiders. He is most impatient with those people. People who come to your door to flatter you. When Zhang Yuniang heard the three words Kinko Lane, she suddenly noticed the key points. Wu Lang from Qing Cao Lane. Wu Lang? Is it the one who is not tall and walks with a limp? Gu Mingda didn't tell the story about the previous case clearly from the rest of the family, but Zhang Yuniang was the one who suffered in this matter and was his bedfellow, so he did explain all the causes and consequences clearly. If it's not Wu Lang, what kind of Wu Lang can there be? Wu Lang did hurt his legs and feet before, but the doctor who the Empress hired was a skilled doctor who cured him. Even though Wu Lang is short, he has such good kung fu that not many people can do. Comparable. Speaking of which, Wu Lang and his sister were the first to follow my mother-in-law. Their brothers and sisters were older than me. It is said that they are people whom my mother-in-law knew in my hometown. The crazy girl had no idea how big a stir her words would cause in Zhang Yuniang's ears. What does his sister do? Does she serve my empress like you? Zhang Yuniang asked. The crazy girl shook her head and said, Miss Wu is very good at doing business. She is the Empress's money bag and your Majesty's money bag. She is also the first Empress merchant in this dynasty. She is as majestic as her brother who went to the battlefield. Zhang Yuniang felt a little uncomfortable when she heard this. If what the crazy girl said is true, does everyone in this world really have another life? If this is the case, then the Wu brothers and sisters did not originally end up with one dead and the other going crazy, but one of them went out to kill the enemy as a general, and the other was doing business with high spirits. So what kind of accident happened that caused them to deviate from their original lives? Niu didn't think as much as Zhang Yuniang did. Instead, she held her chin and said, but the Wu Lang I know is helping bad people, and he even framed my mother. When the crazy girl heard this, she frowned and said, this isn't right, there must be something wrong. As she was talking, she suddenly covered her head and cried out that it hurt. Zhang Yuniang and Niu immediately became anxious and comforted, don't think about it, don't think about it. This is not the first time that the crazy girl behaves like this. It seems to be like this every time she overuses her brain. As long as she stops, she will not be in pain. Such a problem could not be cured even if the Gu family hired a doctor for her. When the crazy girl stopped, exhaustion was written all over her face. Zhang Yuniang said, the person Guobao saw may not be the same person as this one. Don't think too much about it. I will ask Guobao to ask the Wu Lang you mentioned for help later. Niu also nodded obediently. The crazy girl finally calmed down completely, grabbed Niu's hand and said, Mother, Wu Lang will definitely help you. He will never refuse any of your requests. Zhang Yuniang felt even more upset when she heard this, as if a pearl had been thrown into the dark. Such a person, who could have walked in the sun, became a cruel executioner for some unclear reasons. When she took her daughter out of the backyard, Nayuniu held food in her arms and looked up to ask her mother, "Mom, are the two Wulang really not the same person?" Zhang Yuniang didn't know what to say for a moment, and she didn't want to lie to her daughter, so she could only say, "Mom can't tell, maybe you have to wait until you grow up to know whether it is the same person." Nayuniu nodded obediently and said, "Then I hope to grow up quickly, so that I can know everything." Zhang Yuniang originally wanted to ask Xuying more about the evil magic, but Xuying had a headache, so she didn't dare to continue asking. The next morning, after breakfast, the father and daughter went out together again. Old Mrsku wanted to go out with them to find someone, but her body had not fully recovered yet, and Gu Mingda was worried about it. Zhang Yuniang also advised, "Mom, there are many people in that place, what if someone hits me again?" Old Mrsku said, "I was careless, and the person who hit me probably didn't do it on purpose. Liaolang Street is very lively, and there may be fun things to watch. I have been staying at home for so long, I feel like I am going to get sick from being bored." Gu Mingda and Zhang Yuniang looked at her in disbelief when they heard this. Gu Mingda couldn't help asking, "Mom, you almost lost half your life because of watching the fun, and now you are a little better, you want to watch the fun again. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shenshen. Chapter 413. When Mrsku heard this, she looked around guiltily. "Isn't it okay for me now? What's more, when you get older, don't you just have these few hobbies? When you said you wanted me to take care of you in old age, you promised to be filial to me." Mrsku said as he spoke, tears burst out. Gu Mingda's head was getting big. But the old lady was covering her eyes and crying, while secretly peeking at her son's face from between her fingers. Gu Mingda felt angry and funny when he saw his mother like this. "Grandma, you want to help, right?" Niu Niu asked, raising her little head. However, as if she had received the prompt, Mrsku no longer said anything about watching the fun, and changed her words, "Yes, I just want to help you. I don't want to watch the fun. Don't worry, waiter. Mom will be obedient and will never hold you back, and she will definitely not run around." Gu Mingda wanted to stop her, but my mother almost burst into tears on the spot. Niu Niu tried to persuade her, but in desperation she could only say, "You can go out, but don't go into crowded places." Old Mrsku had her head broken by someone while watching the fun, and she was unconscious for several days. Now that she is about to recover, her family cannot let go. Zhang Yuniang simply went out with the old lady. Father Gu watched the whole family go out. His confused head seemed to have suddenly woken up, and he said, "If we all leave, then I will go too." Mrsku turned around, wanting to blame the old man for looking for trouble, but when she met the old man's expectant eyes, she was suddenly speechless. Niu Niu walked forward, held Grandpa's hand, and said, "Grandpa hasn't been out for a long time. He must be bored at home." Father Gu touched the little girl's head and kept nodding, "Grandpa is bored, Grandpa is at home, I want to be a good baby." When Niu Niu heard this, she immediately snuggled into her grandfather's arms. "I missed my grandpa in the palace too." Originally it was a father and daughter going out, but because of the old couple, it almost became a family trip, walking towards Liaolang Street in a grand way. Niu Niu held her grandpa with one hand and her grandma with the other. The little girl seemed particularly happy. "Although I am going out to find someone, It really feels like everyone is out to play with me. It's a pity that the eldest brother, the third brother and the older brother, none of them are at home. Liaolang Street was named after Liaolang, a talented man from the previous dynasty. Unfortunately, he died in an accident at a young age, but he left behind many masterpieces that have been handed down for generations. This street was severely damaged when the old and new dynasties met. In the former dynasty, it was a place where talented people and beautiful ladies came and went. After the reconstruction, this street was full of merchants and bustling with business. There were a lot of shouts coming from both sides of the street, mostly from stall owners selling snacks. Listening to these shouts, Niu Niu felt that her saliva was secreting. Gu Mingda obviously knew his daughter very well and said, "You can spend at most 500 coins on this street." He knew that Niu Niu had money, and Zhang Yuniang would replenish it after she spent it. He did not control it too much, but only set a limit on the spending, fearing that his daughter would eat too much here and damage her teeth or stomach. Niu Niu's eyes lit up, she nodded her little head vigorously, and she didn't forget to say nice words, "Daddy is the best." The little girl was not stingy. When she saw someone selling rice cakes, she waved her hand and everyone in the group got a piece. Not even 2 steps after getting the rice cake, the little girl saw the old man carrying the candied hose again. "You can eat, we won't," Gu Mingda said quickly. They didn't refuse Niu Niu's first treat because they knew that Niu Niu liked being with her family. Forget the snacks at the back, they can't always take advantage of the children. The food on this street is cheap, and 500 pennies is enough for Niu Niu to spend from the street to the end of the street. Unfortunately, they didn't find the crazy little beggar. It seems that this person is not that easy to find. "Why don't we leave one person here to keep an eye on him while the others go back first?" Zhang Yuniang suggested. She was still not worried about the 2 old people running around outside. Old Mrsgu had a look of reluctance on her face. It was rare for her to go out for a walk. She would go back if she was willing to walk around. She wished she could stroll around the street twice more. It's still early, so there's nothing to be anxious about. "I don't have anything else to do today." "I'll look for you with you," Mrsgu suggested kindly. But the whole family knew what the old lady was thinking, and they all looked at her with disapproval. Niu Niu suddenly pointed to a corner behind a stall. "There seems to be someone there." The little girl walked over quickly, not forgetting to look back as she ran forward, for fear of being separated from her family. Gu Mingda quickly stepped forward, held her daughter's hand, and the 2 of them walked to the corner where the people were hiding. A beggar of 15 or 16 years old was hiding there, looking at this group of people with burning eyes. "It's not him," Mrsgu said. This man's age really didn't match what Mrsgu said. Anyway, everyone couldn't help but feel disappointed when they heard the old lady deny it. Niu Niu handed over the hu biscuits she had bought before she had a chance to eat them. The beggar took it without any hesitation and quickly started devouring it. "Brother, please eat slowly, I won't compete with you," Niu Niu said crisply. But when the beggar heard this, he ate faster. As he was eating, he stopped on the spot. Niu Niu hurriedly called to the stall owner not far behind her, "Uncle, can you bring me a bowl of plum soup?" The stall owner selling black plum soup saw that it was bought for the little beggar, and a flash of disdain flashed in his eyes, but no matter how small the meat was, it was still meat, so he filled half a bowl of black plum soup and handed it over. The beggar took it with his dirty hands and drank the black plum soup in one gulp. The stall owner took the money and waited for his bowl on the side. When he saw the black marks on it from the little beggar's scratches, his disdain became even stronger. "1 penny can buy a big bowl, you didn't fill it up," the little beggar said the first sentence. The stall owner's brows were knotted, and he turned around and saw that the Gu family was all staring at him. He could only return to the stall with a curse and filled another half bowl for the little beggar. "This guy is very thief, you pity him, but it's in vain," the stall owner said to the Gu family. Niu asked curiously, why is he a thief? This guy knows everything about the neighborhood. There is nothing he doesn't know about me. I just asked him something. He asked for food, not only for food, but also for money, said the stall owner. Gu Mingda's eyes lit up. He had asked several stall owners before, wanting to find out the whereabouts of the crazy little beggar, but none of them knew anything. Young man, I want to ask you about someone, Gu Mingda said to the beggar. After the beggar finished drinking the black plum soup, his eyes lit up instantly, and he said to Gu Mingda, I know you, you are the top scholar, I don't want money, but you want someone to cure my brother's illness. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shenshen. Chapter 414. The beggar seemed to be afraid that the family would not believe him, so he turned to Zhang Yuniang and said, I recognize you too. You often go to the houses of dignitaries. Even Mrsgu, this beggar can tell you things that the old lady often watches. Looking at the beggar, Gu Mingda's hope ignited again. After all, this man seemed to have a really good memory. The person I'm looking for is a beggar about 8 or 9 years old. He used to be active on this street. He talks crazy. Gu Mingda was halfway through his sentence. The beggar immediately picked up the other half. You said something about saving lives and not wanting to die, right? I can find this person. Gu Mingda was about to nod. The beggar added, that beggar has indeed been staying on this street, but he is already dead. Gu Mingda. Gu Mingda didn't expect that his work would be in vain. Then he thought about it, this man was crazy, and it didn't seem strange that he died without knowing when. But when the stall owner took back the empty bowl and was far enough away from here, the beggar spoke again, I know everything about him. A glimmer of hope arose in Gu Mingda's heart. He also knew that this man was cautious and would not let go of the rabbit before he saw it. He said, I will ask the doctor to treat your brother now. The beggar breathed a sigh of relief. Gu Mingda was a man of action, so he invited a doctor he knew well on the spot and followed the beggar to the bridge where he and his brother now lived. The beggar's brother looked to be about 11 or 12 years old. His face was red with fever and he was restless in his sleep. He coughed from time to time. Gu Mingda took a look at the environment of the bridge cave. It could be said that it was drafty from all sides, and the bedding on the ground were all in a mess. This child probably contracted wind chill because it had been raining a while ago. I'll prescribe a few medicines and pay attention to filling his stomach, and he should be fine, the doctor explained. It's just that the two of them don't have pots or stoves specially used to boil medicine. Even if they are both beggars, they can't fill their stomachs. Gu Mingda ordered Chi Das Han, the chief attendant at the side, to buy some bedding for the brothers. But Niu grabbed her father's sleeve and said, they are so pitiful. Otherwise, we should take them in. Those who can be reduced to beggars are not all beards and tails. After all, people who are intact can sell themselves as slaves to earn a living after they have no other options. The older beggars have broken an arm and have not grown it. Well, he is still in a crooked state, and the smaller beggar is not only mute, but also lame in one leg. The big beggar also heard this from the side. He was already a very smart beggar. He could get some rewards by occasionally selling some information, but he was still miserable. Although he didn't want to continue living like this, he immediately knelt down, kowtowed to the Gu family, and said, I injured my arm, but I will work hard. When my brother recovers, he will work with me. Let's work hard together. Gu Mingda nodded and said, since you are willing to follow us back, I will definitely not miss you a meal in the future. Gu Mingda only took in 2 disabled servants for the sake of his daughter's happiness. After the deed of betrayal was completed, he pressed his fingerprints and watched with his own eyes as his brother's medicine was cooked. The beggar who called Zhang Shitu immediately told the story about the crazy little beggar like beans poured out of a bamboo tube. I don't know where the little lunatic came from. I just liked him, so my brother and I agreed to let him follow us. We really couldn't find food some time ago, and my brother and I didn't have time to take care of him. He likes to go everywhere. He was running around, and it took my brother and I several days to find him. When we found him, we happened to see him being lifted up high by a middle-aged man, thrown to the ground, and beaten to death. If he hadn't known that Gu Mingde was the top scholar in his current subject and had now given the deed of betrayal to the Gu family, Zhang Shitu would not have dared to say anything about it. When Gu Mingde heard this, the first reaction in his mind was that this person had been murdered and silenced. Who killed him? Gu Mingde asked. Zhang Shitu shook his head and said, I don't know who that person is. His appearance is hidden in the shadows and I didn't see it clearly. I just remember that he was very tall and had a jade flute hanging from his waist. When that little lunatic was alive, did he say where he came from? Gu Mingde asked. Zhang Shitu still shook his head and said, the little madman can't explain clearly, but he once uttered a few strange words, about the man-eating locust flower forest, the great heavenly master with hands full of blood. Gu Mingde's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. He had a good memory. He once heard from his colleagues that Dao was the imperial master of the dynasty, so he was called Great Heavenly Master by them. This was the title that the imperial master liked to hear the most. As for Sephora Japonica, Gu Mingde still wanted to inquire more. Sir, the imperial preceptor has always lived in seclusion. He has not been involved in worldly affairs for many years. He only concentrates on cultivating Taoism in his own imperial preceptor's mansion. The imperial preceptor's mansion is a gift from the emperor and is inhabited by successive imperial preceptors. I have never heard of any locust flower forest in it. Gu Mingde frowned when he heard the news from his men. After the case was investigated to this point, they thought that the Li family was behind the scenes. Now that the imperial master's office was involved, they felt that the problem seemed serious. As for what Your Excellency asked about, the contacts between the Li family and the imperial prefect's mansion, my subordinates only inquired and found out that it seems that the imperial preceptor could become the imperial preceptor because the empress of the Li family tried her best to recommend her, saying that she had met him in Guanglin mansion. This master of the state performs miracles. Gu Mingde listened to this and couldn't figure out for a moment whether the Li family or the imperial teacher was in the lead in this matter. In the previous case of Zhang Yuniang, even though every single thing pointed to Li Ziqin, the emperor still didn't punish him. Obviously, the emperor had a heavy heart for the Li family. Now without solid evidence, he couldn't directly search the Li family to find the child. After the subordinates left, Gu Mingde asked the housekeeper to find Wang He. Before taking a boat to Beijing, Wang He took refuge with Gu Mingde and Sun Jiaxing. After Wang He came to Beijing, she encountered difficulties and came to Gu Mingde. Gu Mingde gave Wang He a test at that time, asking Wang He to find out where her difficulties came from. Wang He passed the test, and Gu Mingde determined that although Wang He was a woman, she was capable of doing things, so he helped her. Wang He did not dare to neglect the news. She first came to Beijing with her brothers to open a martial arts school and escort agency. After being embarrassed, she also understood the depth of the water. Now she is taking her brothers to buy some stones and wood. My lord, do you have something to ask me? Wang He asked. Gu Mingde looked at her steadily and said, you seem to have done a big business half a month ago, which is to buy the rockery in the garden of Cheng Xiaogong's family. Wang He nodded. Cheng Xiaogong's family is next to Li's family. Gu Mingde asked, then has the Li family next door made any unusual moves during this period of time? Wang He's face changed when he heard this, but he quickly said, my lord, I am just a businessman and I am not staring at the Li family. Gu Mingde looked at her deeply and said, you have a grudge against the Li family, so it is impossible for you not to pay attention to the Li family. Wang He's deepest secret was revealed by Gu Mingde, and his face turned pale. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 415. Wang He's lips trembled and he asked, "Sir, how does your excellency know this?" Gu Mingde looked at the person in front of him and said, "When you made a spur-of-the-moment idea on the ship and got into the team asking for the reward, I felt something was wrong at that time." After getting off the boat, Wang He expressed his intention to join the boat. Gu Mingde also lacked manpower, so he agreed. It's just that he paid careful attention to Wang He later. Wang He might not be able to hide it well. Every time she heard someone mention the Li family, her reaction would be particularly unusual. Next, it is Wang He's ability to survive. She originally wanted to open a martial arts gym, and the basis for establishing the gym was her family's traditional Huang family boxing. Once traces are exposed and others speculate, the truth of many things will be revealed. Your surname was originally Huang Changquan. I saw him in Fukan in his early years and I remember it very well, Gu Mingde said. The Huang family was once a wealthy family in Guanglin Mansion. Although they made their fortune through martial arts, they later had many properties but only a small population, which was the biggest drawback of the Huang family. The Huang family offended the Li family a few years ago. The Li family took advantage of the power of the imperial concubine. Not only did the Li family have their property embezzled, but the entire family was accidentally killed at the hands of bandits. Wang He is the only survivor of the Huang family. When she heard Gu Mingde tell her origin, her eyes suddenly turned red and she said, "The Li family has done all kinds of bad things and hurt my parents and relatives. I want to take revenge. Is it wrong?" Zhang Yuniang was at the side. When she heard what she said, she felt distressed and comforted her, "You are not wrong in doing this. Revenge for your parents is a matter of course. Our Gu family and the Li family are now at odds with each other, so we need you right now help." When Wang He heard this, he looked at Gu Mingde in surprise. Gu Mingde said, "The Li family wants to use the same method they used to deal with your family to deal with the Gu family." Gu Mingde also talked about the attack he suffered from the censor in the court during this period, and the details of Zhang Yuniang's previous case. "Since you have been staring at their house, you should be able to tell that he has frequent contacts with the censor during this period," Gu Mingde said. Wang He nodded and said, "The Li family did have frequent banquets with several royal historians some time ago." Wang He originally wanted to grab some evidence of Li Ziqin's death, but she stared at it for a long time and saw that the person having the banquet was the censor, so she didn't think much about it. Gu Mingde asked again, "What about the dealings with the imperial preceptor's office?" Wang He had obviously been watching for a long time and said, "Every time someone comes to the palace, the Li family's housekeeper will go to the imperial prefect's mansion. During this time, no one comes to the palace, but they are all people from the imperial preceptor's mansion." He ran to Li's house, running more and more frequently. Although Wang He was unable to find out what was going on in Li's family, so much information was enough to explain the problem. At least when the palace sent people here before, it meant that the palace had a request from the imperial preceptor's office, but now, it seems that the imperial preceptor's office is more anxious. Thinking of the middle-aged man in grey robe who was responsible for kidnapping and trafficking children, he actually hid with Wu Wulang when the news was tight. It seems that these two people are working for the Li family, but they are responsible for different directions. The child kidnapped and trafficked by the man in grey robe was finally delivered to the hands of the imperial master. The Li family must have something big going on and they need to rely on this imperial master. All of this is related to practicing evil methods. If it weren't for such evil skills, there wouldn't be so many children. You often do seedling business, but do you know where there are large locust trees in the city? Gu Mingde asked. He asked tentatively, but he didn't expect Wang He to actually know something. Although I am in the seedling business, I don't have many customers to buy locust trees. After all, there has always been a saying that people are buried under locust trees. Many wealthy families are taboo about locust trees. However, I have a colleague who bought a locust tree last month. 20 of them have grown into locust trees, and they are said to be in demand by a big customer. Gu Mingde immediately asked, "Do you know where those locust trees have been sent?" Wang He nodded and said, "I vaguely heard what he said." He also said that the customer only wanted locust trees, and they didn't need to arrange planting. The money was very generous, which is very strange. Gu Mingde's heart skipped a beat, and he had a vague feeling that these locust trees also hid something terrible. Wang He quickly took Gu Mingde to the house where the locust tree was said to be. The place was remote and close to the suburbs, so a large area could be freed up. It is precisely because there are so few people around that even if something happens, it will not be easily noticed. Gu Mingde sent someone to Jingzhou Mansion to inquire about the owner of the property in this place. On the property deed registered with the government, the owner of the property did not show much abnormality. He seemed to be an ordinary businessman. Gu Mingde felt that this was the imperial prefect's mansion's way of covering up. He was doing some shameful things behind his back, so naturally he didn't want others to associate this house with the imperial preceptor's mansion. But it is precisely because of this method of concealment that it is convenient for Gu Mingde now. If the house is really recorded in the name of the imperial master, Gu Mingde would have to obtain the emperor's approval if he wanted to search it. In this way, it would be a big deal. On the contrary, it is suspected of alerting the enemy. Gu Mingde not only brought the team of internal guards, but also called on the officials of Jingzhou Mansion. A large group of people arrived at the seemingly ordinary house. Just at the entrance, I was blocked. "Who are you? Do you know who our master is? How dare you come to make trouble?" the concierge said viciously. Jingzhou Prefecture Yin, who had come to join in the fun, heard this and suddenly wanted to give up. But Gu Mingde took the official record document and said, "Your master is the businessman Chen Si. Is there someone else behind him?" The gatekeeper immediately said arrogantly, "Our master will be the national master appointed by His Majesty in the future. If you want to search this house, our national master will not forgive you." The prefect of Jingzhou was about to say wait a moment, but Gu Mingde had already ordered directly, "How dare he randomly associate with the national master and slander the reputation of the national master, why don't you arrest him quickly?" The team of internal guards immediately took action after hearing this, and the people of Jingzhou Prefecture were a beat slower. After Gu Mingde had the gatekeeper captured, he immediately walked in aggressively. Before he came to the door, he had borrowed a high place nearby to check the specific location of the locust tree forest in the house. After entering, he went straight to the locust tree forest without any hesitation. The officials following behind him had already blocked the front and back doors of the house, so that no one could run out casually. After entering the locust tree forest, everyone felt that there seemed to be an unusually large number of flies in the forest. Gu Mingde glanced at the soft soil, a trace of pity flashed in his eyes, but he still ordered, "Dig it up." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 416. Maybe it was because he acted so resolutely and didn't get into any trouble in advance, so he went directly to the den of thieves. Everyone behind him was in a state of confusion, but they honestly dug up the ground with shovels. With just a few shovels, we dug up a situation that no one wanted to see. This, how could this happen? The tall and powerful man was usually not afraid of the vicious gangsters, but now he felt that he could hardly hold the shovel in his hand when faced with the small corpses dug up. This must be an accident. After the man said this, he saw that his colleagues looked equally ugly. It turned out that all the people who wielded shovels in the locust tree grove dug up the corpses. There are people hiding under almost every locust tree, some only have one, and some have several. Dig them all up, Gu Mingda said in a deep voice. The softer the ground, the more it indicates that the soil has been filled recently, and the fresher the bodies buried underneath are. Even the governor of Jingzhou, who was still thinking about quitting, had his face as dark as water. So many children have been poisoned before they can grow up. The people behind this are really evil people. Human beings are naturally protective of young children. Not only did the person behind the scenes not protect them, but they did such evil things, which really exceeded the psychological bottom line of everyone present. Perhaps because of this reason, there are not many servants serving in this house. The people led by Gu Mingda quickly subdued everyone in the house. What was surprising was that they actually caught someone in the practice room who shouldn't have been caught. The Taoist boy of the national preceptor. It all seemed too coincidental. Gu Mingda originally thought that even if the evidence was conclusive, because the Li family and the imperial master had colluded, they had already woven a fine network. He had even prepared to publicize this matter to everyone in the capital. Maybe this was the only way to do it. Bring the national master to justice. Although the person caught now is not the national master himself, what is the difference between his Taoist boy and the national master? The Taoist boy wearing Taoist robes looked at the two of them coldly and said, "Two of you, don't you want your official career to be prosperous and soar into the sky?" When Jingzhou Prefecture Yin heard this, a strange look flashed in his eyes, but it was covered up by the thought of Gu Mingda's presence beside him. Gu Mingda said coldly, "Even if I want to have a successful official career, I won't risk so many lives." The Taoist boy shook his head and said, "If you are willing to stop now, my master is willing to forgive your offense and help you become a great minister, and your future will be bright." Gu Mingda said, "That's ridiculous. Someone, capture this Taoist boy and interrogate him severely." Gu Mingda was not only unmoved, but instead searched hard in the practice room to find out if there were any children who were still alive. The Taoist boy said, "You can't find anyone alive. Those boys and girls have been blessed." Gu Mingda's eyes were red with anger and he wanted to ask more questions, but the Taoist boy's face suddenly turned pale and a trace of blood overflowed from his throat. It was obvious that he was dying after taking poison. "You are actually willing to die for that master who practices evil?" Gu Mingda didn't understand. The Taoist boy said, "My master can reach the gods and fill the sea. He is omnipotent. After I die, he will look for my reincarnation and make me worry-free in the next life." The Taoist boy died after saying this. Gu Mingda just felt that this man really couldn't think about it, and said, "His master himself can't be saved, how can he be saved?" The governor of Jingzhou seemed to be covering up, nodded vigorously and said, "Master Gu is right, the imperial master himself is a clay bodhisattva who has crossed the river. Wherever there is the ability to help others to rise to the top." The house was searched inside and out, and numerous shocking evidence showed that the imperial master was practicing evil arts. But they still have no idea what kind of technique it is and what result it seeks. As for the imperial master's mansion, the people they sent came to nothing. Everyone else in the imperial master's mansion was there, but the imperial master was nowhere to be found. After the case was made public, the government and the public were shocked. Upon arrival, everyone in the capital was astonished by the madness of the imperial master. Over the years, hundreds of boys and girls have been allowed to practice evil arts, which is simply shocking. Secondly, Gu Mingda was able to directly catch the evidence of the national preceptor's crime with a few clues, which is said to be the best in the world. Gu Mingda discovered such a big case. Although he could not save the lives of those children, it also made the parents of these children burst into tears. The way these people express their gratitude is also very straightforward. Every morning when the Gu family opens the door, you can see a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables. Although the real culprit was caught, the imperial master seemed to have evaporated out of thin air. Not only could there be no trace of him, but even if the arrest documents were issued, there was no clue about him. Gu Mingde vaguely felt that what the imperial preceptor was doing behind the scenes seemed very important, but the people in the imperial preceptor's office were tortured and tortured without asking any questions. He still didn't know the purpose of the imperial preceptors practicing evil behind the scenes. As for the list of officials who have worked closely with the imperial division over the years, there is a big word Li clearly written on it. Although Li Zikin had been ordered to inspect the border towns, the mountains were high and the roads were far away, and he still could not escape the emperor's order of reprimand. As for other powerful families in the capital, because the imperial master has always lived in seclusion, they had few opportunities to see the imperial master. At most, they asked for some peace charms from the imperial master's mansion, but they escaped disaster. After Gu Mingde solved this case, he also wanted to solve the last trouble for the Gu family. Cai pose. The censor's impeachment was self-contradictory in Gu Mingde's eyes. On the one hand, they impeached Gu Mingde for cheating in the imperial examination, which caused the sudden death of his brother-in-law Zhang Guangzong, and questioned whether Gu Mingde himself might have cheated. On the other hand, they impeached Zhang Yuniang for being unfilial to her stepmother, and Gu Mingde refuted it at the time. He was a disciple of the emperor, and was selected as the top scholar by the emperor after the palace examination. Questioning his cheating in the imperial examination was equivalent to questioning the emperor. The censors only used this reason to make up the numbers, and the real thing they wanted to report was unfilial. As for whether to be filial to one's wife's stepmother, it was also untenable. If it weren't for Gu Mingde's clean past, these people really couldn't find a reason to attack, and could only make far-fetched arguments. But when the Gu family was in trouble before, this far-fetched reason inexplicably stood up in the court. At this time, with the disappearance of the imperial teacher, the officials in the entire court seemed to suddenly wake up. Even though MRSCAI was still jumping up and down, she was stopped by the words "the stepmother is unkind, and evil will be punished in Jingzhou Prefecture." Poor MRSCAI, with the secret help of the Li family, went through untold hardships to enter the capital. Now that Li Zikin was sent out, no one cared about her affairs. After leaving Jingzhou Prefecture, she had nowhere to go and became a beggar. The Queen Mother in the palace watched the troubles of the Gu family being solved, and found the emperor and said, "Emperor, it's time for you to take Niuniu into the palace." After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shenshen. Chapter 417. When the emperor heard the Queen Mother's reminder, that young and cute little face appeared in his mind, and he felt a real sense of longing for her. "What you are saying, Queen Mother, is that you are just afraid that she will play wild outside the palace and be reluctant to come back," the emperor said. The Queen Mother was also worried and said, "This child longs for the outside of the palace. Unfortunately, there is nothing good in the palace, so we cannot keep her here." While the two of them were talking, they completely forgot that Niu Niu was originally a child outside the palace, and they had forced her to stay in the palace. Qian Rongsheng walked in at this time, bowed and said, "Your Majesty, Beauty Li has submitted the apology letter." When the emperor heard the name Li Miren, his face was in a trance for a moment. He couldn't figure out why he felt so close and strange to Li Miren. The Queen Mother saw that he had not accepted the apology letter for a long time, and she thought that her son had been obsessed again. She reached for the apology letter, opened it and took a look. Ms. Li is apologizing for recommending the imperial advisor in the first place. She said that she didn't know the person well and mistrusted him, the Queen Mother said. Such words, when translated, probably mean that the imperial master's mistakes have nothing to do with her beauty. There were all human beings present, and everyone knew that this was Li Miren trying to avoid responsibility. The emperor felt like there were two villains fighting in his heart. After a long time, he said, "If you ask someone to tell Mrs. Li, just say that I have received the apology." In consideration of Mrs. Li's many years of service, I demoted Mrs. Li to. In the emperor's eyes, the beauty's status was already low enough, and to lower her status now would really be an insult to the Li family. The Queen Mother said casually, Ms. Li is really lucky. With so many lives on your hands, it is only the emperor that you are so generous and kind. You have cared about the relationship between husband and wife for many years, and now you are still willing to feed her well. The emperor had no choice but to say, delegate the Li family to be a daughter-in-law, seal off the Guanji palace, and leave only one palace maid to take care of her. In addition, send the 3 girls of the Li family outside the palace. The previous 2 demotions were quite severe, but anyone with a discerning eye could see that the emperor personally assigned palace maids and eunuchs to take care of the Li family, and he did not remove the personnel even after the demotion. Obviously, he still had feelings for the Li family. No one in the harem dared to ridicule Mrs. Li. But this time, even the words to blockade Guanji Palace were spoken out. Blockade and confinement are different. The confinement will be lifted one day. The Li family can still eat and drink well every day, and so can the people in her palace. Act as usual, but now sealing the palace gates and removing most of the people serving you is different from being thrown into the cold palace. Li Kanu also didn't expect that she had done evil in the past without any punishment, but now that she had finally calmed down for a while, she was punished one after another. She was wrestling and beating in Guanji Palace. Chunying, the only palace maid left to serve her, rolled her eyes when she saw her like this. If you throw these, what will we use in the future? Do you think that the Ministry of Internal Affairs will give them to you in the future? Shall I send a new one? The only remaining palace maid, Chunying, was from the Queen Mother. She had a grudge against the Li family and was ordered by the Queen Mother to torture Li Kanu severely. When Li Kanu heard this, she glared at the other party fiercely and said, even if I am demoted and grounded, you, a servant, can't say anything at will. Chunying was not an ordinary palace maid, but rather a big woman with a round waist. She was used to doing rough work. Without hesitation, she immediately threw her big ear scratcher and beat Li Kanu to the ground. Who are you claiming to be my concubine? Do you still think you are concubine Li? Does Cai Nu have the right to call herself my concubine? The palace maid said condescendingly. Li Kanu raised her head and stared at Chunying in disbelief. She covered her face and said, you actually dare to hit me? I will tell your majesty if you commit the following crime. But what greeted her was another big ear scraper. Chunying said, I'll beat you if I beat you. What's wrong? Look at what you look like now. What's the difference between following the cold palace? Don't you really think that you will one day make a comeback? Li Kanu yelled, but no matter how loud the noise was, there was still no response from outside. Li Kanu thought of the imperial preceptor who was currently unknown. She thought in her heart that as long as the imperial preceptor was not caught, she would have a chance to make a comeback. She would naturally have the means to deal with this hateful palace maid in front of her in the future. Besides, she was thinking that the emperor might not have any feelings for her anymore. Now that people are under the roof, she can tolerate it for the time being. Chunying kicked her over again. Don't wait around, get up and wash your clothes quickly. If they can't be washed clean, see how I deal with you. Li Kanu had never suffered such grievances before. She stayed up for 7 days. When Chunying was not paying attention, she finally seized the opportunity. She quietly took the silver and ran to the palace gate. She handed the money out through the hole in the door for delivering meals. Please help me and tell your majesty that I have been tortured in Guanji Palace and that I have been thinking about your majesty. A big hand took the silver and said, I know, just wait, Madam Li. Li Kanu breathed a sigh of relief in her heart, but she was looking forward to it. Day after day passed, but there was still no news. When she seized the opportunity again, she ran to the palace gate, handed over the silver, and couldn't help but urge her. But these people were also very rude in their words. Ms. Li, the money you gave us is too little. You should know better than us what kind of virtue the people in front of you have. Li Kana gritted her teeth and handed over 3 more gold ingots. But this time there was still no news. She ran over to urge her again, but this time the guard's words changed. Don't worry, Madam Li, the message has been delivered, but without money to urge them, they are not active in doing things. The guard said one thing after another, to get money. Li Kana was determined to take out the money again, but this time she was not so lucky. Chunying appeared behind her at some point. Well, you have money to give to others, but you don't have money for me, Chunying accused. Li Kana now saw Chunying, just like a mouse seeing a cat. She was really scared of being tossed around during this period. Chunying would beat people up when she was not satisfied. She was very skilled in beating people, which could make people cry for their parents, but it was not fatal. To be honest, Li Kana's life after sealing the palace gates was not that bad. Although she was accompanied by a living devil every day, her life was better than those concubines who had fallen out of favor. Because she ate normal meals and was full. It was just lard mixed with rice. Every day, Chunying could find endless work to torment her. With physical fatigue, her appetite inevitably became bigger. Gradually, she was locked up in Guanja Palace. Not only did she not lose weight, but she became fatter and fatter. She was no longer as weak as a willow in the past, but she was even more muscular than Chunying. I don't know if her money finally worked, or if there was any other reason. Before winter came, she finally met the emperor. Your Majesty, I am bullied by this bitch maid every day in Guanja Palace, Li Kana cried as pitifully as before. The emperor was frightened to see Li Kana, who was stout, full of flesh, and wearing old clothes, and took 2 steps back. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shenshen. Chapter 418. The emperor looked at the fat pig-like woman in front of him in disbelief. Protect him, Qian Rongshen even simply protected him in front of the emperor. Your Majesty, it's me. How can you not recognize me? It was Chunying who harmed me, and it was concubine Xian who harmed me. People bring me lard rice every day, and that's why I'm so fat, Li Kana one cry after another. The emperor tried to find the shadow of concubine Li in this woman, but the result made him uncomfortable. The emperor didn't know why. Looking at the fallen leaves falling outside the window today, he thought of Li Kana. He ignored the obstruction of others and wanted to see his former beloved concubine. But what he saw made him extremely uncomfortable. He wished he had never been here. At least this way, the beloved concubine was still the beautiful image in his mind. The emperor wanted to leave, but the sudden surge of emotion in his heart made him unable to help but prefer Li Kana. But just as he was about to speak, he saw Li Kana's obese appearance. He couldn't say those loving words no matter what. What made him feel even more uncomfortable was that he didn't understand what was wrong with him. Who can see that such an ugly woman can feel love? The emperor thought his head was broken. He endured it again and again, but he still couldn't hold it back. He wanted to treat the woman in front of him better. Well, you have suffered a lot during this period. You should also know that you are wrong. In the future Li Kana looked at him expectantly. Since the emperor was willing to come to see her, she felt that the past should have disappeared like smoke. She looked forward to returning to the favored concubine Li Gaifei of the 6th palace. The emperor took a deep breath and said, in the future, I will supply you according to Zaiyi's example. The emperor couldn't bear it anymore. After saying this, he turned and ran away, as if something was chasing him behind him. When Li Kana heard this, she shouted sternly, Your Majesty, how can you let go of our friendship for so many years? Let me go. The emperor felt as if there was a ghost chasing him behind him. He ran all the way into the pavilion of the imperial garden. The honor guard almost didn't catch up with him. He only felt that his back was covered with cold sweat. He couldn't understand. Facing such a Li family, how can love arise? He saw the Queen Mother walking this way with Niu Niu from a distance, and a warmth suddenly rose in his heart, as if he finally caught a glimpse of the warm sun on a cold day. Niu Niu was unwilling to enter the palace before, but Gu Mingda had returned to the palace to resume classes. The Queen Mother sent someone to take Niu Niu into the palace, but maybe it was because Niu Niu was in a bad mood, and even concubine Shun's fetus was not so safe. The Queen Mother had no choice but to send the child out of the palace again, and instead of living in the palace, he changed it to a day school. Niu Niu now goes to the palace to study every morning, has lunch with the Queen Mother, studies piano in Shaokong Palace in the afternoon, and then leaves the palace before the palace door is locked. Just after lunch, Niu Niu was walking in the imperial garden with the Queen Mother. When the Empress Dowager and the Emperor's ceremonial guards gathered together, the Empress Dowager had just received the news that the Emperor had come to visit Li. She did not mention it at this time, but deliberately asked, "Why is the Emperor interested in visiting the garden at noon?" When the Emperor thought of Li Keinu's face, he was still frightened. He did not hide it from the Queen Mother and said, "I came to take a look at MRSLI." The Queen Mother asked casually, "Mr. Li has been imprisoned for so long. She must have known that her sins are serious and she does not dare to make any excessive demands from you." The Emperor thought of what Li shouted before leaving and shook his head. "Mother, Mrs. Li has been imprisoned for so long, and she is still clamoring to be released." The Emperor felt that he was intellectually disgusted with such a snake-hearted woman like Mrs. Li, but emotionally he couldn't help but think of his years of love. Although Li is such an ugly and embarrassing person, he always wants to prefer 3 points. He felt that his state was extremely weird. He was a man himself, and he still remembered that there was a beautiful woman before, but there was an extra scar on his arm, and he never favored her again. The Emperor didn't think there was anything wrong with his cold nature at all. Instead, he thought that he was too tolerant of Mr. Li and that there was a big problem. The Emperor's instinctive vigilance made him dare not deal with this matter casually. Instead, he asked Qian Rongsheng on the side and said, "It seems that we have never found out what evil method the imperial master practiced in the past." Qian Rongsheng shook his head and said, "The criminal destroyed all the evidence before fleeing. He has been wanted for so long, but no trace of him has been found." The Emperor frowned and said, "Speaking of which, no matter how good Mrs. Li is, she is still my savior. I don't know if I am too harsh on her." Seeing the Emperor struggling again, the Queen Mother said with a sullen face, "Emperor, although Mrs. Li is beautiful, there are many younger and more beautiful women in the harem. Emperor, you have to say that you have saved her life. Her hands are you have spared her so many lives, and killing so many people would have already cost her a few lives. Thunder, rain, and dew are all due to your kindness. You held the Li family in your hands. If I really owe you a favor, it is she who owes you." Niu Niu asked curiously, "How did Empress Li save the Emperor's uncle? Didn't she ask for reward?" When the Emperor heard this, he suddenly recalled the scene when they first met. He paid a private visit incognito, leaked information while walking, and was hunted down. It happened that the Li family who went out to worship Buddha sent his servants to lure him away. Although Mrs. Li was a 16-year-old girl, she was very decisive in doing things. She said she fell in love with me at first sight and wanted to marry me. I have never seen such a bold and brave girl. When the Emperor mentioned the past, his face changed. A little more tenderness. Niu said innocently, hearing what the Emperor said, "It seems that Empress Li is really brave. I have already thought about it. If I want to meet my sweetheart, I will not take the initiative to say that I want to marry him. I want him to come to my house to propose marriage. I will only marry him after my parents agree. After marrying him, I will also live with my parents." The Emperor was amused by her and said, How old are you? You know what a sweetheart is. Of course I know. A sweetheart is someone you like very much, so much that you want to be with him forever, Naounio said seriously. The Queen Mother knew that the assassination was later blamed on the Prince of Li because of her past with the Prince of Li. She could not say many things, so she could only say, Naounio is so young, but she knows the orders of her parents and the matchmaker's words. As a girl, if she secretly runs away with a man she just met, her parents will be so sad. Naounio nodded vigorously and said, I will not make my parents sad. If my parents don't agree, I will not run away with him even if he is my sweetheart. The Queen Mother was suddenly reminded by Naounio and said, Li not only wants to run away with your uncle the Emperor, but her parents don't object. They found their daughter and eloped with a man they just met for the first time, and even let them get married and become a formal couple. The Queen Mother only understood the thoughts of the Li family at that time. This was to confirm Li's status as the legal wife among the people. Naounio frowned and said, her parents are really weird. The Emperor felt a strange feeling in his heart. Naounio asked again, did all the servants of Madame Li come back later? The Emperor told this story to several people, but only Naounio took the initiative to ask about the whereabouts of those servants. The Emperor shook his head and said, these servants fought with the gang of thieves until they died, and none of them survived. Then if you think about it carefully, are the servants the real lifesavers of the Emperor? Naounio asked. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shenshen. Chapter 419. The Emperor suddenly felt guilty. At that time, he was only busy chatting with Mr. Li, and did not even ask about the arrangements for the families of the servants. The Emperor also thought that over the years, Ms. Li had often asked for favor for her parents and brothers. She cared about the honor of her mother's family, and she did not look like a person who would give up wealth for a strange man. The Emperor couldn't help but wonder in his heart, how could such a person run away with the man he met for the first time, and whether there were any hidden secrets about the past. His mind just reached this point, and he couldn't help but have doubts, but there seemed to be a layer of fog covering his thoughts, making him unwilling to think too badly of Li Shi. The Queen Mother looked at her son from the side. He was such a shrewd man in government affairs, but his soul was about to be lost when he met the Li family. Emperor, the AI family previously sent people to Guanglin Mansion to investigate the case of the criminal Li Chaosheng. Instead, they heard about another story. It was said that there was a couple. The husband favored his concubine, but the wife was not allowed to dote on him, so they asked to leave. The evil Taoist woman obtained a talisman water and secretly fed it to her husband. Since then, the husband has forgotten about his concubines and only treated his wife wholeheartedly, never seeing anyone else in his eyes. When the Emperor heard this, he said, Mother, these are folk jokes, how can they be taken seriously? Men dote on concubines mostly because they are young and beautiful. As for living a good life with their wives wholeheartedly, maybe they are from the wife's natal family. When you are developed, you have something to rely on. The Queen Mother did not expect that her son did not think about this matter at all. She deliberately asked, since the Emperor does not believe in these Shinto doctrines, why did he confer the title of Imperial Preceptor? The Emperor shook his head and said, that year there was a severe drought in the capital, and it was the Imperial Master who begged for rain. It's not that I don't believe in Shinto, I just think that as a person who is really proficient in Shinto, why should I do anything bad? A trivial matter. When the Queen Mother heard this, she smiled faintly and asked, Emperor, do you think everything in the back house is trivial? Although the people sent by the Queen Mother had not yet found the old Taoist priest, after experiencing various speculations, she could only think that this was the only credible theory, that is, the emperor was possessed by evil spirits. Only this statement can explain why the emperor tolerated the Li family like crazy. What if this man is not an ordinary person, but a parent, a dignitary, or even the king of a country? Is this still a small matter in the inner house? Then does this wife only get the favor of the inner house? This Taoist can transfer the love from his concubine to his wife. Who knows if he can exchange it for something else? The Queen Mother's words one after another left the emperor speechless. Niu Niu was listening to the two chatting. The little girl rolled her eyes and said, "If there is such a way, wouldn't it mean that you can have whatever you want? This is too terrible. What if one day, someone wants to? What should I do if I take away my family's love?" What Niu Niu cares about most is her family. She feels that she is the happiest little girl in the world. She also feels that if others want to steal something from her, it must be her family. The Queen Mother looked at the little girl with a smile and said, "My dear, you can rest assured here. People like this who covet other people's treasures cannot tell what is the most precious thing in the world. In their eyes, power and wealth must be more valuable than their family members. The relationship between them is more important. Emperor, can you think of the reason for your preference for the Li family?" the Queen Mother asked. The more the emperor thought about it, the more doubts he had in his mind. It was just a life-saving grace, but he also felt that he should not be such a long-term lover. After all, the viciousness shown by Mrs. Li now was completely incompatible with his ideal wife. Going in the opposite direction. I will let people continue to strictly pursue the imperial master. During this period, I will also let people keep an eye on Guanju Palace, the emperor said. The Queen Mother nodded, but she felt in her heart that it would not be that easy to find someone like the imperial master who was involved in Shinto. The emperor had doubts in his mind, which were not easy to solve. He not only sent people to check the Li family, but also asked people to keep an eye on Li Zikin, who was patrolling the border town, to see if there was any abnormality in the Li family in the capital. He went there himself, a trip to Hyogyo Temple. However, the eminent monks at Hyogyo Temple didn't see anything wrong with the emperor, and it didn't seem like they were affected by those strange methods. As for the people in Guanju Palace, they didn't know how anxious they were. She didn't want to eat the lard rice at all, but every day at mealtime, a large bowl of rice would be delivered to her on time. Chunying was also on the side, staring at her. "My dear mistress, why don't you take a bite? Are you dissatisfied with me? If there is something I did that makes you unhappy, you can just point it out." Although Chunying said this, she had already started to roll up her sleeves, as if she wanted to clean up her arrogance. Li Shi tried her best to show that she was not afraid of Chunying, and said, "Don't threaten me. His Majesty has already met with me and said that he will restore me to Zheyi. It won't take long for me to be reinstated. Let me go, and then I will be the master of the harem and the concubine under one person." When Chunying heard this, she couldn't help laughing and said, "Look in the mirror and see what a ghost you look like now. If you were the emperor, would you be able to keep your mouth shut?" Chunying directly brought the mirror to Mr. Li. Li looked at the fleshy face in the mirror and felt a dull pain in her eyes. She couldn't help but accuse, "It's all you who hurt me. I was born to value my life. I won't eat this bowl of rice." But her retort and struggle were in vain, and she only received more severe treatment from Chunying. Chunying opened Li's mouth and stuffed the bowl of rice into his mouth fiercely. Li didn't want to eat, but Chunying's hand was too strong. Every time she wanted to lose weight, it was like this. Chunying forced her to eat more food, but she grew fatter and fatter. Mrs. Li was extremely looking forward to the imperial master being able to continue casting spells. She never thought about life like this. In a house somewhere in the capital, a national master in Taoist robes stared at a plate filled with blood in front of him with a pale face, muttering to himself. All around him, candles of various weird shapes were lit, and all kinds of talismans were pasted on them. Those talismans seemed to be written in blood. An ordinary person would feel dizzy after just one glance, and would not dare to take a closer look. Although the Empress in the palace has fallen out of favor, I am still His Majesty's favorite minister. Why is it that the time has come to destroy everything? The person who spoke was none other than Li Ziqin, who was supposed to be patrolling the border town. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shenshen. Chapter 420. When the imperial master heard this, he sneered and said, "Master Li, don't you think that you are still the emperor's favorite? You don't think carefully about which favorite would be sent by your majesty to leave the capital and never return. His Majesty seems to be holding you high, but in reality, how much power do you have in your hands?" As soon as these words came out, Li Ziqin's face turned ugly. It had been half a year since he had been ordered to patrol the border town. During this time, he had also understood that his rights were actually decreasing instead of increasing. It's called inspection, but in fact, the people in the border towns are not under his control at all. Even if he said a few bad words about others and got it wrong, there would be no reaction from the capital. He is just a third-rank official made of clay. The imperial master continued, "Master Dao obviously cast a spell for your mother-in-law, but in the end it suffered backlash. Your mother-in-law has never returned to her high position. This is not because there is something wrong with my spell, but because of your mother-in-laws in the palace. Now the enemy is here." Before this, Li Ziqin only knew that the imperial master practiced evil magic and used the blood of boys and girls to practice daily, but he did not know that his sister's favor and his official position were inextricably linked to the imperial master. This matter of changing one's destiny is just like luck. It always waxes and wanes. When your enemy rises, you will fall. If you are really willing to be someone else's subordinate, these words will help you. "I didn't tell you this," the imperial master said coldly. Li Ziqin had already experienced the glory and wealth of being in a high position, so how could he tolerate these things leaving him? "Please tell me, Taoist master, who is my enemy?" Li Ziqin asked. The imperial master opened his mouth and spit out a name, Gu Mingda. Li Ziqin suddenly felt that everything was understood. No wonder his sister went crazy during that time and wanted him to deal with the Gu family. "Since you knew this earlier, why did you hide it from me?" Li Ziqin was unhappy about being hidden. The imperial preceptor had always looked down upon Li Ziqin and said, "Can you accept this? Don't you always think that you are an official based on your true ability?" Li Ziqin was speechless. The imperial master continued, "Things have always been kept secret. If you tell your concubine everything, no one can trust you." Li Ziqin had a concubine whom he loved very much. He would not hide anything from her at home. Even Miss Li San was born from his concubine, but it was only recorded in the name of his legal wife. Everyone in the capital knew that Li Ziqin doted on his concubines and killed his wives, but because the Li family was so powerful, no one spoke about it openly. "I don't know how many times your mother-in-law has persuaded you to send this beloved concubine away, but you are unwilling to do so. If not, I would have told you these things long ago," the imperial master said. In fact, the imperial master didn't understand why Empress Li hated this concubine so much from the beginning, but Li Ziqin was like someone who had been poisoned. No matter what others said, he allowed his concubine to dominate the family. When Li Ziqin heard this, he touched his nose, changed the subject and said, "Do you really want to make this move? There is no turning back when you open your bow. If you fail, you will be doomed." The imperial master looked at him with cold eyes and said, "Do you think you have any other options now?" After Li Ziqin left the room, before he could calm down while sitting in the yard, a servant hurried in to report. "Sir, your Majesty made 2 decrees in court today. One was to promote Gu Mingda, and the other was to demote you to the position of governor of Kaohsiu. You'd better return to the border town quickly. If the person who conveyed the decree arrives, You can't be seen. People, how can this be done? After hearing this, Li Zikin did not immediately worry about being demoted. Instead, he thought that he would be demoted after Gu Mingde was promoted, which was exactly the same as what the imperial master said. One goes down and the other goes up. Gu Mingde is his enemy. Li Zikin turned around and returned to the secret room. Whatever you want me to do, just tell me. If you don't succeed this time, you will be benevolent. Li Zikin was obviously determined. The imperial master opened his mouth and said a name. Li Zikin's eyes were full of confusion, and after a moment, he said, "Okay." Just after he got out of the secret room, Li Zikin told his confidants, "Send someone to send the madam, young master, and ladies to the south, and then pick them back up after a while." The confidant looked troubled. "My lord, my wife has always been clinging to you. She has chased you from the capital to the border town and back from the border town. With your arrangement like this, I'm afraid she won't want to leave." The Madam Li Zikin refers to is naturally not his wife, but his favorite concubine, Mrs. Li. If she doesn't want to, then tie up the carriage and tell her that this time it's not a joke. Li Zikin obviously made up his mind. The confidant had no choice but to comply. After Gu Mingde finished today's class, he got into his carriage and waited at the palace gate for a long time before finally seeing the jumping figure. Niu Niu, accompanied by the little palace maid, ran quickly towards the carriage. "Dad, I learned another piece of music today and will play it for everyone," Niu Niu said with a smile. Gu Mingde held her daughter in his arms and said with a smile, "Okay." Niu Niu added, "There will be no classes tomorrow. The emperor's uncle said he is going out hunting, and he will take me with him then." Niu Niu was looking forward to this. After all, she had never hunted in the capital's hunting grounds. Gu Mingde smiled and nodded, and said, "Since His Majesty is willing to take you with him, you must be good tomorrow and don't cause trouble to others, you know." Niu Niu nodded vigorously. Since she no longer had to live in the palace, Niu Niu's mood had visibly improved. Now the Queen Mother and the Emperor, as well as Sun Jiaxing and his wife, were in almost the same position in her heart, and they were all elders who treated her very well. "Daddy, will you become a cabinet elder in the future?" Niu Niu suddenly asked. Gu Mingde was puzzled. "Why do you suddenly ask this?" "Miao Miao told me that the emperor's uncle thinks highly of Daddy and promoted Daddy so quickly. He will definitely let Daddy enter the cabinet in the future." "She said that her grandfather entered the cabinet in this way," Niu Niu said. Gu Mingde shook his head. "It's too early to say whether he can enter the cabinet now. Who can say what the future will be like?" "Does Daddy want to enter the cabinet?" Niu Niu asked. Gu Mingde said, "As a minister, I naturally want to be the most powerful minister, but things in this world cannot be achieved by thinking. You are not allowed to make wishes casually." Gu Mingde patched it up, and Niu Niu couldn't take advantage of it, so she could only cover her mouth and nod. The carriage had just returned to Gu's house, and before the father and daughter got off, Chi Das Han came to greet them with an anxious look on his face. "Master, it's bad. Dr. Yan from Baiyun town sent someone to send a letter saying that Master Zhao left in the afternoon and never came back. No one knows where he went," Chi Das Han said.